But let's talk about Ron Barron and coming on CNBC. Now, if you haven't heard, Mr. Ron Barron has come back on CNBC to talk about Tesla, and he's making headlines with this $25,000 model vehicle commentary. Now, first thing I just want to throw out is what's interesting is it just me, or is Ron coming on mainstream media to talk about Tesla far more than he used to in the last little bit? I want to say this is the second time in a month he's come on CNBC to talk about Tesla. Now, that's not me complaining about it. I love hearing from Ron, but I'm keeping that in the back of my head as, why is Ron coming on so much? Because of course he's probably requested all the time, but the guy only comes around once in a while. And of course, I guess in this case, there's this conference, so maybe he's promoting that. But that's the second time in a month that we've heard from Ron. Maybe I'm reading too much in between there, but throw in the comments if you think there's anything to that. Let's hear what he has to say about Tesla.
As we always do, but then I want to...
And let me know if the audio is clear.
I sort of broaden it out and talk about the markets and some of the other companies that you're invested in. There was an analyst call just yesterday, this is HSBC, which really initiated coverage. They said that their price target was $146. I assume you probably looked at this and probably laughed given your very bullish views on Tesla. But what was so interesting about the report was that they really were trying to define the company as an EV automobile maker. Is that the way you think about this company?
I think about it as a technology company that's providing services to their own company and to others. They can't possibly be matched by anyone else. They have data, technology. They make cars cheaper than anyone else. When Ford makes one of these cars, an electric car, every car they make, they lose $36,000 on. $36,000 per car. Our company now makes about $8,000 or $9,000 in profit a car. They were making $15,000 in profit a car. But if they build a plant that cost $7 billion for 1 million cars, that plant was making $15 million a year, $15 billion a year on a $7 billion investment. $15 billion on a $7 billion.
Now, to be fair, I think the cost of building these factories have probably gone up a little bit from 7 billion, maybe around 12 or 10. But his point still stands.
Investment. An ordinary industrial company would make 15% on capital, 20% the most. This guy's making his capital twice a year. Now he's making it once a year. He's making $8 billion in a $7 billion plant. So he's the lowest cost person. Everything about the business is trying to drive prices lower. Right now, they will be in a very, in the 1900s, early 1900s, the automobile companies were tremendous innovators. No longer is the case. In the 1950s, they decided they were going to go for profitability, and they outsourced all of their supply chain to their detriment. And all these companies went bankrupt. Hundreds of them went bankrupt. And now the way we're going is that their electric cars, they drive, I guess they have about 30 miles a day, 30 or 40 miles a day, and they have 3 million of them that are collecting data. 100 million miles a day they're getting for data, and then they're also getting compute that they're going to have more compute than anyone in the world in 18 months.
So he's talking about FSD, compute power, data. But remember, Tesla doesn't just get data from cars that have FSD. Tesla gets data from every single car that's opted into data sharing, right? And again, Tesla can run FSD in ghost mode, in shadow mode, and continue to run their analysis on it. So data is not the problem for Tesla. The problem for Tesla, like Ron says, is compute power, and they're getting a lot more of it in teraflops moving forward.
To train it.
Have you been surprised, and this is true of the other EV makers, a lot of EV makers have put up big goals in terms of sales, and then they've scaled those goals back, saying there's just not the customer demand. Do you think that is the responsibility or a function of the products that these other automakers are putting out? Or do you think that there actually isn't the demand for EVs writ large that maybe was anticipated or expected?
There's 1.5 billion cars that have to get replaced. They do about 80 million cars a year, and a small percentage of those, 10%, are electric right now. Ultimately, it's going to be all electric. But the reason there's not more demand is the cars that are out there are not very attractive by the dealers, by the car companies, and they're expensive, number two. And then in addition to that, the dealers who sell them, they don't want to sell them because there's nothing to service. The dealers make all their money on servicing. So dealers sell them, they're not selling them.
such a key point right there, right? With EVs, you don't have the monthly oil changes, the tuning, the timing belt needs to be redone at a certain point. All the pistons, maybe like some of the pistons might be off. You have everything with the engine that could go wrong. And on top of that, you have this mysterious element to when you go bring your gas car into the auto mechanic. He could say anything. Let's be honest, and throw in the chat if you've had an experience like this. You go in for what you might think is a little cheap thing, couple $100, and he comes out and he says, "You know what? Everything is wrong with your car. And if you don't fix it, it might this thing might collapse on the side of the road. It's $1,200, $2,000." I think we've all experienced that, and that's how they make their ongoing money. And that's a key reason why a lot of dealers give free oil changes as a part of buying a car from their dealership. Because it's a long con, right? It's a long con.
Talked about trying to bring prices down, and that's something that Elon Musk has talked a lot about. At the same time that he's going to try to bring prices down, you have the potential for Tesla to become a target of the UAW, which of course just made this new deal with the other big automakers at meaningfully higher prices in terms of what those employees are going to be getting. What do you think about that?
I think Tesla's employees are the highest paid workers in the world, as far as the automobile companies go, because they own stock.
As a function of the stock.
And that stock option would not be present in all instances if it were a unionized company. When the unions were in control of Fremont, as soon as they had trouble, they ran from it. Tesla took over that plant in Fremont after the unions had left, after the company had gone bankrupt. Tesla employees, there's a good story that one of the executives of, and then I want to talk about other.
Yeah, no, of course.
One of the executives who devised the pay plan for the employees was telling me that he's a small Jewish guy like me, and he was walking through a plant, and a large black man walks over to him, shaved head, tattoos all over the place, and says, Ira, are you the man who devised the pay plan for us? And he said, yes. He said, I want you to know that I'm the first man in my family, the first person in my family to ever be able to afford a home. And thank you very much. And so the workers there make more than anyone else by far, and their health care, all the benefits are better. The unions have been trying to organize Tesla, Toyota, all the foreign companies for years. They failed repeatedly. Why? Because those companies are not, the union's not in business to keep the employees. They're in unions to have the power.
Before we move off Tesla, just for
by
a
the way,
second.
the stock went down yesterday, not because that report.
What do you think it is?
Because of Joe Biden, President Biden, who, by the way, I love what he's doing for Israel, but I don't like that much what he's doing in business. Some things I like. But he's the one who said unions should organize Tesla. That's what happened.
Does Biden really carry any weight? Let's be honest. Let's be honest. No offense. What Biden says, I don't think carries really any weight for what the stock should do, in my opinion. We all know where Biden stands with Tesla stock and what he actually thinks about it. Interesting commentary from Ron Barron.
Yesterday when the stock went down.
Okay, we'll come back to the Biden piece in just a second. Melissa Lee, I think, has a quick Tesla question because I know I want to talk to you about a whole bunch of other things. Melissa?
Yeah, Ron, thanks for taking my question. When you think about China, how do you think about the growth there? Because that's a key piece to the Tesla story. Li Auto reported its earnings yesterday and had strong EV guidance. It's gaining market share. I'm just wondering how you think about the competition, but also the weakening Chinese consumer. And have you discounted that portion of the Tesla story at all, given the Chinese economic forecasts out there?
Tesla right now is doing about 1.8 million cars a year. When we started investing in the company 7 years ago, when we invested between 2014 and 2016, they were doing 41,000 cars a year. So 41,000 cars a year to 1.8 million, they're on their way to 20 million cars. China is about 1 million right now of their 2.8 million. But a large percentage of what they make in China is exported from China to Europe. And the more they build in Europe, of course, the more they're going to save on transportation costs and duties. The idea is that China invited Musk in, and invited him in because the Chinese car companies have done very poorly for a long time. And the promise was that he's going to help them become better car manufacturers, and he's not trying to take over the market in China, better car manufacturers and develop a local supply chain. And so he was the only one that's ever been invited into China that's been able to not have a partner, a local partner, to operate their business. So I'm convinced that they have good operations in China. The person who runs their Chinese business, the Tesla business in And Austin, in fact, is probably in line to be important person at Tesla overall. He's Chinese, and he was brought from China to Texas.
Hangzhou.
And
He's talking
runs the
about
business there.
Hangzhou.
He's going to be in charge of all the automobile business. So I think the relations they have with China are exceptionally good. People are getting something from it. And I think that business will continue to grow. But he's going to open plants all around the world for low-cost cars. And wait till you see what's going to happen when all of a sudden they start selling cars instead of for $40,000 a piece, for $25,000 a piece, which is going to happen in about a year and a half from their new model. The new model, they think, is going to do 5 million cars a year. 5 million cars a year for the Model 2. That's coming.
So he just throws that in right at the end to talk about the Model 2 and what's happening there. What I find interesting, I'll talk about China just for a quick hot second first, just because I think China is an interesting part of this conversation. Look, when the Chinese economy was doing really well a few years ago, the ongoing narrative was the Chinese economy is doing well. Why would any Chinese consumer continue to want to buy Tesla cars when there's so many other quote unquote better options out there for Chinese consumers? So there was that anti-Tesla narrative then. Now that the Chinese economy has kind of shown its true colors, and the numbers we can all agree are a little bit fabricated, let's be honest. What was inflation, like 1% or something like that not too long ago? Anyways, I forget what number that was, but it was just clearly anyways. But now the economy is doing bad, of course, evidently. And now the ongoing narrative is, how will Tesla sell cars? As Ron Baron astutely points out, China is used for an export hub for the excess amount of cars that they build in China. And Tony actually throws in the comments about this is why Tesla and India rumors have been coming out quite a bit. Now, you guys know where I stand with Tesla, China, their codependency. Remember, China gets something out of Tesla being there. Tesla is one of the few companies that is able to operate in China without having CCP ownership within the company, right? Remember, to operate a big enough company in China, you will have the government's hands in all of your business, and they will be a co-owner with you, right? And so for Tesla to exist and thrive in China, there has to be an ongoing back and forth. This is just basic logic that China is also getting something from Tesla being there. And in my opinion, what they're getting is a lot of top-notch manufacturing techniques. And of course, I think educating the entire labor base on how to do this. Of course, I think a lot of the technology that happens from China or in China for Tesla makes its way to other companies, XPeng being, of course, one of the obvious examples of just basically copying.